Okay, I already shared with you all the slide and the notes, slide plus notes. What I'm going through is basically slide, but in order to understand the whole thing, you must read the notes. Okay, the notes, maybe some of the notes are very brief, but if you want to know more, you can basically Google, because everything now is readily available. Okay, my part is basically on safety aspect only. The first half of the semester is basically on site management. Okay, but I just want to go through very quickly on the overall concept so that you understand the relationship between site management and then safety control. Okay, let's start with the project lifecycle. Maybe you have learned this thing in project management class. Dr. Khairozan will talk about project lifecycle costing. So this thing, you will see this thing again. But anyway, okay, when we want to develop a project, okay, starting from nothing, we shall start with the inception stage here. This is what we call initiation. Okay, they start with the feasibility study, and then design development. This is where architect and engineer will be called upon to start designing things and prepare all kind of documentation, and then documentation for tendering purposes, so that contractor can basically participate and then being evaluated, and later stage being awarded the tender. Okay, so after the tender was being awarded, then basically construction will start somehow or somewhere during the short period of time. Okay, then construction will start and then go on until project being hand over to the client, and during after the handover period, then basically start what we call defect liability period. Okay, so the big cycle there, this is what we call project management. So if people ask you what is the difference between project management and construction management, perhaps by now you should understand. Project management scope of work basically start from the beginning, the initiation stage, where there is nothing. The client just simply have an idea that they want to start a project. The details are not so clear. So, but things will get through the whole process until the drawing is there, specification, etc., etc. Okay, so that's what we call project management process. Starting from here until here is a big, big, big scope area. Then how about construction? Okay. Uh, After contractor was being awarded a contract, then basically the contract basically already being formed between two parties, client and then contractor. Okay. The signing thing might be later, but once you are being identified as the winner, then basically the contract was being formed already. Okay, except uh, to make it official, then they need to sign contract to submit a few things and etc. Okay, when basically construction will start, when contractor was given a site possession, okay, access to enter into site. Okay, so let's say to enter into site is this point. So that is when the contract period will basically counted. And then when contractor handover, this is what we call practical completion date. So that is basically the period that contractor have in order to complete all the requirement by the client. Okay, let's say the project, the client asks project to be completed in 2 years. So that will be 2 years in between the site possession and then practical completion handover. Okay, and you notice that there is some wording here, construction management. So what we are talking for this subject is basically fall under construction management, where when we talk about construction site, this is where the construction management phase basically inside, okay, inside this construction management phase. So the site is basically inside here, okay, during the construction of what basically being asked in the contract document. There is another terminology, we call it contract management. Before the site possession, this period, we call it pre-contract period. Pre-contract period is basically when contractor need to submit a few things, such as the insurance, the performance bond, and even the work program, preliminary work program, etc., etc. Then only after they submitted those things, maybe another one will be insurance for the workers as well. Okay, then only they are being allowed to start work. Without that, the contractor normally won't be allowed. Okay, that is situation in Malaysia. All right, so contract management. Contract management, so this is what we call pre-contract, and during construction phase, this is what we call post-contract period. Okay, let's say construction going on, and then practically complete, and then hand over, then basically start the defect liability period. Defect liability period, it is like warranty. In construction, we do not use the word warranty for construction works, okay? We call it defect liability period. Okay, then let's say everything is fine. Next period would be the operation. This is what we call operation. So operation means the owner will operate the facilities, will use the facilities, okay? And it depends on how many years that this building can last. So during this period, there is another terminology that we call it facility management. In UTM, you notice that we do have many master program. One that you might engage in is basically MKAM program. We call it construction management. And then we do have project management program, master in project management. We call it MKAZAC. Okay, normally offer in KL and JB as a part-time program only. We do not have the full-time. It was meant for working personnel. And then contract management. Contract management, we do have one course master program in Faculty of Built Environment. Normally, the quantity surveyor will basically pursue this kind of degree because they want to know more about specific detail on the contractual matters. Okay. And then facility management. Facility management is when you operate or manage the building. So during that period, you need to maintain, and then you need to basically, sometimes the building owner can basically change ownership due to sometimes people do sell the property and then somebody else takes over. And then if you are familiar living in apartment or condominium, so we do have management office. So management office, normally people who are well versed about facility management, okay? And there is another terminology, we call it life cycle costing. Life cycle costing. Life cycle costing is another area in construction management whereby if you are able to evaluate each phases, okay, the cost of each phases. Feasibility study basically do have costs that you need to pay to the consultant, and then architect and engineer have to be paid certain fees, and then construction, for sure contractor will get the payment based on the construction cost plus whatever profit, etc., etc. If we can evaluate those things, each of the costs, then it basically will sum up. Okay, it become a life cycle costing. So what is the purpose? This is when normally the client, when they want to evaluate a few alternatives. Let's say they have A, B, C, D, F, whatever alternative. They can easily evaluate if they know the cost where the building can withstand. Okay, for how many years? Maybe such development can run for 100 years. And then if you divide that by how many years and then days, at the end of the day, you will get a unit rate, so that we can evaluate which basically alternative would be more profitable. That is the life cycle costing. Okay, so what we are going to focus is during construction. So perhaps that is what you have been learning for the first half of the semester. So now my focus is basically on the second half, basically on safety and health. Okay, this is again, if we go through the normal construction or conventional construction, we will start with inception, conceptual, design phase, and then tendering, construction, and then close out. This is our focus area. Okay, this subject is about this focus area. And let me go very quickly. Okay, quickly, we do not want to go through the detail because our focus area is basically during construction phase. So what construction phase is all about is like this. Okay, managing the requirement, and then make sure we fulfill the contractual obligation, and then we monitor the progress of the project so that it basically in accordance to whatever KPI that we already give to the client. Okay, project crossout is just like a few procedure, testing, commissioning, and etc. So, okay, now the focus is on construction phase. Okay, and if we are in the construction phase, the client expect contractors to fulfill obligation, or what we call project requirement. So project requirement consists of things like time, completion on time. Nobody like project being delayed. Okay, everywhere you go, if the project being delayed, then people start not feeling very happy. Okay, so fulfilling time requirement, quality, and quality are being spelled out in the specification. Specification is the one that normally being put into what we call tender document. Subsequently, it become a contract document. So the bigger portion of the contract or tender document consists of specification. Specification is basically to cater or to spell out what are the things that need to be done in accordance to the quality or workmanship. And then cost. So cost aspect within budget. So the contractor must basically complete the project within budgeted or within the contractual amount. Okay. And then now come the safety and health. So my focus, the second half of the semester, is about this thing only. So when we talk about site management is not about safety and health. It basically consists of many things. It's about quality. It's about project cost. It's about timing. Timing, we already learned. We do have one subject, project planning scheduling. So we do not want to cover that thing again. Environmental. Environmental is the one that you learn in sustainability subject. Okay. And then contractual obligation. This is the one that you learn in construction law and contract. Okay, so our title, our course title is construction site management and safety control. Remember, construction site management and safety control. So the construction site management you already learned in the second half of the semester. Okay. So mine is basically on safety control. I focus on safety control. I do not focus on quality control, cost control, and there are so many control in construction. Almost everything. We can focus on material control, manpower control. What else? So many things. But my focus is on the safety control. Okay. So that is basically the connection between the previous lecture, first half of the semester, and then subsequently the second half of the semester. And you notice that when we talk about managing construction site as a contractor, especially, you are being obliged to basically fulfill many requirements. Otherwise, the client won't pay you according to what initially agree, because you do not comply to requirement. In fact, your contract can be terminated because you do not fill certain what we call clauses or KPI. And among these things is basically safety and health. You see, safety and health. In safety and health, we are going to learn a few topics, not all, because safety and health itself, by itself, is a very specific field. You can become an expert in safety and health. And normally, people can pay you a lot in this particular field. But of course, in order to be good at safety and health, you need to have knowledge, skill, and certain certification, etc., etc. Then perhaps, and then some experience. Those are the things that add up to qualify you to earn more. Okay, so but for sure, in our subject, we do not have one specific, the whole semester, one specific subject for the safety and health itself. Okay, we just want to cover a few topics. What could be the topic that we are going to cover? We start with the OSH Law. So today is about OSH Law, and we cannot run away. When we talk about OSH Law, we cannot run away from the standard. Remember, when we talk about the quality normally being referred to the specification, but at the same time, in order to manage quality, we do have some kind of standard. Okay, example, ISO. ISO for the quality is basically ISO 9001. For environment, we do have ISO 14001. How about safety and health? We do have ISO 45001. Okay, that's what we call management system. Um, quality. Quality, normally people refer to specification. Specification. But when we talk about OSH, we do not have such specification for OSH. The reference point for OSH is basically OSH law. Similarly, for environment, if you want to basically take control or in charge of environment, you must basically well versed about environmental law. Environmental law, that is basically the controlling document. Unlike quality, quality basically specification, because quality have something to do with the cost. If people pay you less, then basically you will give them less. It is not to say that you do not give them less quality, but that is the requirement. For instance, flooring. Some of the area sometimes require cement render. That is the specification. But some of the area require tiles, marble, etc., etc. So it is not to say that when you give people cement render, so you are giving them a less quality thing. No, no. Quality basically hand in hand with the specification. What specification say? If specification spell out that you had to provide cement render. So basically, that is what you need to give because that's what people pay you based on certain costs. Okay, so quality has something to do or very closely related to what is being spelled out in the specification. Okay, so we will cover today about OSH law. With regard to this ISO 45001, I'm not going to cover, even though I have given you some of the documents that is for you to read, but I will give you, I already share with you all the short video in the e-learning, so that at the end of this session, I will release quiz number 1. Okay, with regard to our class, we have decided not to have a final exam for this semester, like similarly like previous semester. Okay, previous semester, if you have taken the class planning scheduling, so the concept was similar. We do not have any final exam. So in order to make up for the losses of final exam marks, remember coursework is basically 60%, final exam is 40%. So we do not have the final exam. So the final exam will be replaced, okay, will be replaced by extra, what we call extra assignment, quizzes, or even tests, okay. And I'm not really sure whether Dr. Karuzan have covered all in terms of giving all portion. So basically, we will split into two, 30% for Dr. Karuzan for the coursework. So mine will be 30%. And then this portion is again 20% and 20% for my portion. So split into two, basically 50-50. All right. So in order to do that, I will give you assignment later on, perhaps after the Edufitri. And but then the quiz will be going on. So we are going to have a few quizzes along the way. Maybe I targeted around maybe around 4 quizzes. So each quiz would be around 5%. So if we do have 4 quizzes, that will be around 20%, and then the remaining will be coming from assignment. So, but please do your assignment what we call neatly. Sometimes people just simply submit assignment, 1-page assignment. We ask you to discuss the matters, but then you just simply give 1 page. What do you expect in terms of marking? So please give a little bit extra. Extra work will basically, at the end of the day, will earn you extra marks eventually, even though we do not say literally, but that is the concept. Okay, so OSH law will be covered today. So ISO 45001, I let you to watch a few videos, 6 videos, short videos. And then we are going to cover accident causation, or the causes of accident. And then we are going to cover about risk management. And then we are going to cover about performance measurement, OSH performance measurement. And then we are going to cover about safety culture, and then we are going to cover about what we call on a little bit on stress, occupational stress, and perhaps ergonomics. Okay, so that is the concept. All right. So, okay, with that, perhaps you get the idea, the connection between what you have learned at the beginning of the first semester. When we are managing construction site, there are many control measures that we need to come out with. And one of the control measure is basically safety. After this, I will zoom into what we call safety. We start with the what we call occupational, the occupational law. Okay, let me share the slide on law. Okay, this is the slide. But the law that we are talking is related to Malaysian law. Similarly, when you learn the law in any other country, you will learn about that law. So it is up to you to figure out what kind of law, especially OSH law, available in your countries. Okay, that is your duty to check whether there is such law or not. I'm not really sure. Okay, you are the one that should be well versed. So our law, the name of our law is basically Occupational Safety and Health Act. That would be one of the current law. Okay. So in Malaysia, we do have these two law, namely, FMA, FMA 1967, Factory and Machinery Act 1967. It looks very old, okay, but since it is not being abolished yet, so we are still using this law until now. Even though the law maybe looks old, but you must understand the nature of the law. It was being passed in the parliament. That's why it is being called act. Okay, not many acts are being passed to the from the parliament because it is not easy to pass any law because the parliament need to basically meet up and then you need to basically propose and then all these parliamentary members have to argue if they know how to argue and then they will go on and on and on and then they will go through all kind of hassle. Okay, so that's why in order to pass a law it basically will take some time. So that's why certain law remain to be seen in even until now, but then such law can be revised or amended. So you don't have to introduce a new law, you just basically have to improve. Okay, so the first one is there, FMA. Then way back in 1994, we do have a new OSH law. We call it Occupational Safety and Health Act 1994. By right, by now we should have a new law by right. But I think started from last year or last 2 years, I have heard about this thing. They were coming with a new proposed law, but unfortunately, due to maybe constraint of time, due to maybe many difficulties, they do not come up with a new law. They just going to make it just like amendment. What could be new in the amendment? Example could be the new thing would be regarded with regard to, I would say, fines. For the time being, the maximum fine in Malaysia, if you fall under category of non-compliant to the OSH law, the maximum fine is only 50,000 ringgit. That is not much. People have been trying to push so that the fine could be increased. Now, I think the new amendment is asking for 500,000 ringgit, which is quite comparable with Singapore. Singapore law has been, the fine has been there, 500,000 Sing dollar. That's why we have seen the safety standard in their country is quite high, maybe because they have a stringent law. And that could be one of the possibility. Okay, that would be what we call OSH law, OSH law. Okay, before we go into the detail, if you notice the word, why do we use the word OSH? OSH basically stands for occupational, this one, occupational. What does occupational mean? Occupational mean work or job. So meaning to say, the law related to when you are doing the work that protect you while you are doing work. Other than that, it will not. That is not the coverage of this law. Example, the building collapse because it is not safe or poorly constructed. That has nothing to do with the occupational safety and health law, because safety and health law is basically to protect the people who basically at the workplace while they are doing their work. That is what Occupational Safety and Health Act is all about. So you must understand properly the wording being used. Okay. So when we talk about OSH law, this is the main law, only two for the time being, factory and machinery, and then OSHA 1994. But then, if you are working in other industry, there could be many other law that could be related to that industry. For instance, in construction industry, we do have a CIDB Act, Construction Industry Development Board Act, which inside the act, it basically granted the CIDB as the authority to exercise whatever duty in order to safeguard the construction industry. And when they say safeguard construction industry, one of the issue could be related to the issue of safety and health. Okay, so we can read those act together, and then many other acts. Mining, when people are working in the mining industry, they have to read this act together, and etc. etc. Okay, this is just example. Okay, but our focus is basically on the OSH law, nothing else for this slide. Okay, now let's take a look at the existing law, Factory and Machinery Act. Okay, of course, when it was being introduced way back in 1967, um, at that time, the industry was basically the focus of industry basically focused on the factories and the machine being used not only in the factory, some of the machine mostly being used in the construction industry and perhaps mining. So that's how that law basically relate to. Limited scope because of the industry that it cover, too prescriptive, meaning to say it depend too much on the wording, okay, the wording of the law. So in order to make the law clear, then the wording has to be long, etc., etc. At the end of the day, you will notice that this act is maybe 1-inch thick booklet compared to the current one, compared to the OSHA 1994. Too dependent on government. The previous act was too dependent on government, meaning to say that everybody wait for the government to say something. When the government says something, and then only people will basically follow. Otherwise, there is no initiative to start new things, or basically to come out with something creative, etc., etc., to safeguard the safety and health. No. At that time, it was too dependent on government. And then another reason could be due to accident statistic. Before 1994, we have seen the rising of accident in many workplace. Okay, so because of that, then the government thought, or being pushed by many parties in the industry, why don't we have a new kind of law so that we can tackle many accident cases. That was the idea, and basically it works. It worked. If you compare the statistic throughout maybe 10-20 years, you can see reduction in number of accident. That is true, but somehow it compensate with the rising the increase in the activities, because once the economy basically expand, then there are a lot of activity going on. Then of course the accident basically could be more due to many activity compared to the previous 20 years. But that is another situation. Okay, so in summary, FMA, as I mentioned, only cover a few area, manufacturing, meaning to say factory, mining industry, and quarrying, and then construction industry at that time. But under OSHA 1994, the coverage will basically goes into almost every sector of our economy. We are talking about Malaysian economy. Okay, what could be the sector? Maybe the sector is like this. Where is the sector? It's not there. Never mind. Okay, the sectors such as mining, tourism, etc., etc. Okay, because nowadays people basically work in many different areas. Retail. Last time maybe we have not seen people working in the tourism industry, etc., etc., or even e-hailing. But now, as economy expand, the new job are being created. So the act should basically cover everybody except, okay, except two parties, the armed force and then seafarers. Seafarer meaning to say people working on shipboard, international ship where they might be going all around the world. Maybe they just park in Malaysia for a while, but most of the time they are not under our basically in the country anyway. So except for these people, the rest are being covered by this law. So the coverage is much bigger. So the approach in FMA was very prescriptive, too dependent on the government, concern for inspection by regulation authority. They depend too much on the authority. Okay, so for OSHA 1994, it called for self-regulation. So this is a key word in a new act, self-regulation. What does self-regulation mean to say? Well, even though the law is there, the law serves as guideline. The law basically do not spell out in detail. So it is up to you to come out with the detail creatively according to the risks that you are dealing with. So we cannot basically equate all company should basically um, implement the same kind of rule and regulation. If, for instance, you are just small shop owner, you only have maybe 5 or 6 people working to manage your shop, your shop. So, but still the risk is there, okay? But your risk is not going to be as big as the construction company or people having 100 workers. So it must be basically comparable. Supported by code of practice and guideline. Okay, even though the law might be very thin, very compact, but that is the issue. But it basically supported by many code of practice and guideline that can be released anytime as the industry want. Okay, even though OSHA 1994 was being released way back in 1994, but then the guideline can be produced maybe next year or this year if the government think we need to tackle certain issues. Okay, so this is a good thing about the current law. And then another good thing about current law is call for workers' cooperation and participation. In the previous law, workers basically have no say. Workers basically have to comply with the rule regulation, and their opinion might be useless. But now, the the success, I would say the success of any safety and health and implementation would heavily depend on workers' cooperation. Without the workers' cooperation, then basically your rule and regulation, your strategy become useless. Okay, you are the one that come up with all the thing you thought that it is good, but then there is no takers. So what is that for? Then objective of the old law, for sure, at that time, focus on factory and machinery. and registration, inspection of machine, because machine is being used at the construction site. Less provision for health at that time. But now, you notice that the word welfare is there. So the health is there. So you know what? In old days, we say OSH. But nowadays, if you Google, this wording has been changed to OHS. Try Google, then you see what could be the difference between OSH and OHS. Well, OSH is basically occupational safety and health. So the safety is much more dominant. But then nowadays, people are talking about the health aspect is much more that we should give emphasis instead of the safety, because the health aspect basically is the one that um, cannot be seen most of the time, and then it can affect people most, maybe around 70% compared to the accident part. Okay, so I already mentioned continuously, um, anywhere in the world, okay, regardless of how perfect your safety and health management system, accidents are due to happen. Okay, we never know, because human beings are not consistent. Today they are coming to the work with high performance, high alert, but then tomorrow we never know. Okay, so because of that thing, accident can happen, but except the quantity, is it on a large scale or medium, minor, etc., etc. Okay, talking about the law and regulation with regard to safety and health, it is not something new to Malaysia. In Malaysia, we have seen some kind of safety and health regulation was established way back, even in 1896. Okay, 1896, we already seen Selangor Boiler Act, Perak Boiler Act, Penang Boiler Act, Johor Boiler Act, boiler, and boiler. What does that law basically tell us? Okay, if you can Google the word boiler. Boiler is basically pressure vessel. Nowadays, it is being used a lot in the factory. It's just like if you at home you have pressure cooker. Okay, so in the factory, the cooker is much bigger. They call it pressure vessel. Okay, pressure vessel. It is very dangerous. Uh, it could basically explode. Okay, and some people basically die, not because of explosion, but because of while doing the maintenance work, while basically handling the boiler, because it is high pressure. Okay, at that time, way back in 1896 until 1937, if you remember the history of Malaysia, basically we were the biggest tin mining producer in the world. In the world. So that's why the British basically came to Malaysia in order to get all the material out of the country. That was the intention. Okay, so this boiler enactment basically is very similar to what the British already have in UK. They do have similar name of the law, boiler enactment. They have been using that for a long time. So they basically they bring it to Malaysia, and then just it is a copy paste. So what you have seen here, this kind of law, boiler enactment, machinery ordinance, factory and machinery act, is basically similar to what the British already have in their country. it is just a copy paste. Okay, only when Malaysia developed OSHA 1994, then this law basically do not exactly copy paste the British law. It basically has a combination of some kind of Australian, UK, and even American law. That was the framework. Okay. Philosophy and guiding principle of OSHA. Now I want to focus on OSHA alone. Okay, OSHA alone, because this is the one that when you start working, especially the Malaysian, when you start working, you are going to deal with this kind of law somehow or other. Okay, first thing first, the philosophy of the law. Responsibility to ensure safety and health at the workplace lies with those who create the risk. So this is the keyword, create, and those who work with the risk. Okay, who basically create the risk and who basically work with the risk. So what basically, which party does this statement refer to? Okay, so perhaps you can imagine, let's say we do have a piece of land, empty piece of land, and then suddenly you can see a factory being built up. Okay, then after the factory being completed, then they will call people to work at that factory. Okay, so people who work in that factory, they come in one piece, but then maybe after working for a few month or year, then basically accident happen. Okay, they basically come in one piece and then they go back in many pieces. Okay, so basically the workers is the one we associate with work with the risk. So in this context, the workers basically do have responsibility to play. Then who create the risk? Who create the risk is basically employer. Employer, you are the one that ask people to come to work. Initially, there is no factory. People are basically stay at home, safe from accident. Then basically you open up a factory, then you call for people to work. So basically you are the one that create the risk. So you also have the same responsibility as the employer, but normally employer bear most of the responsibility. If we take a look at the non-compliant cases, the one that the authority will chase after mostly the employer. They are the one that will have to pay the maximum fine. But we as a workers do have responsibility to play. We can be fined, and then we can be put into jail as well, because accident does not happen by itself. There must be somebody who trigger that kind of accident. There is another party. So I would say this is the first party, second party, and there is a third party which can be held responsible as well. Who could be the third party? That's what we call manufacturer and supplier of plant, machinery, or substance. They themselves can be held responsible as well. Okay, they just simply cannot supply material or substance and then get the payment and run away. No. They do have responsibility to play. Okay, as we already mentioned, OSHA 1994 asks for self-regulation, meaning to say the creativity is being given to the organization to come up with the set of rule and regulation that's suitable to their organization, but within the framework of OSHA 1994 and FMA 1967. Consultation. Consultation simply mean there could be three party. Consultation with the employer, employee, and then another third party refer under here is basically the government. Okay, so tripartite agreement. Government play roles as well, and then employer do have responsibility and roles, and then the employee. Okay, and then of course workers' participation is very important, otherwise this thing basically won't work. Okay, successful implementation of safety program depend first on management commitment. Maybe you still remember the presentation given by the professional last week. Okay, I did ask about the cost being put in the tender or contract document, because from what we have seen in the past, because we have done study as well, sometime in the contract document the safety and health are being spelled out at the very minimum, what we call wording, and not to mention the cost being associated with, which is not reasonable. And then how do we expect contractor to do all the things because they are not being paid? Okay, because the bill of quantity are not being developed. We do develop bill of quantity for all the construction activities, but then when it comes to safety and health, they are being missed out. Okay, by right they should be spelled out clearly, so contractor can come up with the costing, and they can be held responsible if they do not comply to that things, and if they do not implement those things, so there is no money will be paid to them. Okay, that should be the concept. And then employee commitment, meaning to say everybody. When we talk about work organization, they could be management team, but the management team themselves, they are part of the employee itself, except that they are management team. So the majority of the people basically fall under this category. And then OSH committee, OSH commitment committee. Okay, commitment by the OSH committee. Who would be this OSH committee? We will look into this thing later on. Okay, objective of the Act. There are four objectives: to secure safety, health, and welfare of person at work. Person at work. Then the second objective, to protect other person. So other person could basically refer to visitor, dispatch, people who basically send all the parcel letter to your office. They got nothing to do with your workplace anyway, but they just come to send something. And then perhaps the public, if you are doing construction in the urban area, so the public will basically pass not through your construction site, but around your construction site, because that is the only way to get around. So they are being protected as well. So the workers itself is being protected, and then other than workers, such as visitor, people who send you deliveries, and then public, etc., etc. Then number 3, to promote the occupational environment adaptable to person physiological and psychological needs. Physiological, psychological needs. Physiological meaning to say your body. Okay, the well-being of your body. You do not want to go to the office uh, uh, feeling healthy, then because you need to carry a lot of weight, okay, to do the work, which basically you need to push things, you need to carry things, and then at the end of the day, you come back with all kind of body ache at the end of the day. So this is what we call physiological. We do have one topic such as ergonomics. Okay, psychological, such as occupational stress. Okay, we do have one topic for that. So I would say that the first two is basically about safety, and then the third one is about health aspect. So that's what safety and health is all about. The fourth objective has nothing to do with the first two, it just simply say, once we do have a code of practice and then guideline, all kind of guideline complete, then perhaps the old law such as FMA can be deleted. So this is what the objective number 4 is all about. Okay, by right, the law should be very progressive. Once the law become obsolete, then we should basically remove and replace by a new law. But again, to introduce a new law, we should be very careful. We should be very careful, because all the wording inside the law can be the target, where people basically can read and then thought that, okay, the law doesn't say this, and then I can freely do things. That is the dangerous of the wording in the law. So it should be introduced with extra careful. Okay, with regard to the framework of the law and regulation in Malaysia, so this concept will tell you why do we have certain things such as the act, and then why do we have certain things such as regulation, why do we have certain things such as order, guideline, and then code of practice. Okay, the act. Act means something in Malaysia, because we do have a parliamentary system. The act normally being passed in the parliament. Okay, in the parliament. So that's why the act is not easily being gazetted. This is the act numbering 514. Even until now, 2021, we have seen new law, new act being released. The numbering has not surpassed number 600 yet. Still lingering around 500 something. 500, I'm not sure, maybe 560 something. You see, after how many? 1994 is like 26 years already, 27 years. So we have not seen even this numbering surpass number 600. So you just imagine how the law is not as, we do not pass the law as what we want. No, that is not the concept. Okay, if we do not pass law as frequent as what you want, then how come the law become relevant? Well, the law become relevant through the introduction of what we call regulation. I would say this is what we call the parent. And then this could be the children, which basically still sit under the parent of the main law, but they simply call it regulation. So the law, normally when you read the law, it will basically, at the beginning of the book there, it will basically have the king. In Malaysia, we call it Duli Yang Maha Mulia Yang di-Pertuan Agong, His Majesty, the King. So it has the king name. So when it has the king, it bear the king name. So meaning to say this thing must be very, very big. Okay. If you do not comply, then there are some kind of repercussion. Okay. So then, in order to keep this law relevant, so they could be so-called supplementary. Okay, supplementary thing. The name is basically called regulation. Regulation can be released every now and then. Example of regulation: SHO 1997. Example of regulation with regard to what? Let's say NADOPOT, maybe 2005, if I'm not mistaken. So SHO stands for Safety and Health Officer. When OSHA 1994 was being introduced, then the word SHO was being mentioned in the law. And at that time, nobody are familiar with the SHO. It is not a things that people in the industry use to have all these kind of people. Okay, so then people start to ask, who is this guy? What kind of experience? What kind of qualification, etc., 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 etc. So that's why further explanation have to take place. So they release SHO 1994 in order to fine tune a few aspects. Okay, that's what we call regulation. So regulation can come every now and then. Let's say this year or next year, we expect that we need some kind of regulation in order to curb certain situation. So they will call regulation, whatever the name of the regulation, and then they will basically in bracket put the year, maybe 2021. Okay, that is the concept. Then, if, for instance, the regulation was not being released, they can be supplemented by what we call order. Order mean instruction. Okay, instruction. But when it come under OSHA 1994, it bear the same weight. Mean to say, if you do not comply, then basically you can be punished, etc. Okay, it is not a simple instruction where you can basically miss the instruction. No, this is when it fall under the main law, the main act. So it basically have the basis. When you do not comply, then there could be issue with that. Unfortunately, we do not have many order around. Only these two order has been released with regard to safety and health officer again. This one basically indicate it spell out about the in OSHA 1984 when SHO was being released. The statement about SHO, it mentioned construction industry. When the project was 20 million and above, then only it required to have safety and health officer. How about project less than that? Is project less than that, like say 10 million, doesn't have any risk associated with that thing? No, the risk is still there. And construction industry being one of the most risky industry, other than mining and then agriculture. From the record that we have. So it is very risky industry. So regardless of how much the contract sum, so the risk is still there. So that's why the order in 1994 basically spell out, even though the project might not be 20 million, if it employ around 100 employee, then perhaps you should have one safety and health officer as well. Okay, that is what order is all about. And the status of order is a little bit low in terms of the authority. Normally, it is being directed by what we call director of general, meaning to say the big boss of agency. We call it DOSH, DOSH, Department of Occupational Safety and Health in Malaysia. Okay, which basically the authority who take care of the safety and health matters in Malaysia. When it comes to regulation normally under the authority of the ministry. So the ministry in charge in Malaysia is basically MOHR, Minister of Human Resource. This is where the DOSH basically belong. DOSH as a department belong to this ministry, and the big boss under this ministry, for sure, it is the Minister of Human Resource. So the Minister of Human Resource basically will try to bring whatever regulation that they wanted to be passed in the parliament for the member of the parliament to basically look at, and then if there is nothing to complain, then perhaps they will vote whether that regulation will be passed or not. Okay, so that is in terms of authority. Okay, now we are coming into the last two. We call it guidelines. So Guideline, example of guideline, there are many guidelines such as HIRARC. We call it HIRARC. We are going to learn about HIRARC in our third class called risk management. So guideline can be released anytime they want, okay? But in order to release the guideline, it's not that easy as well. They need to be drafted, they need to be checked or went through by many parties. Sometimes even accommodation are being called to sit into a committee that go through all these things before they are being released or gazetted to the public. And then code of practice. Code of practice, or simply called best practice. But when the name mentioned code of practice, meaning to say it has the implication of the law. Okay, so if, for instance, accident happen, then you are being brought to the court. You can defend yourself. So the court will ask you what kind of code of practice that you use at your construction site. Let's say you mention, oh, we do not use the code of practice being released by DOSH, but we do have our own, such as what we mentioned in the what we call during the professional talk last 2 weeks. Okay, they have their own because Petronas, Petronas basically do have a lot of fund resources. They can basically come up with their own, which could be much better than the current code of practice. But if you do not have the luxury to come up with your own, so what could be the best thing? The best thing is just basically follow what people already prepare. Then if you already comply to the code of practice, then accidents still happen. Perhaps what we call the fine and imprisonment could be reduced because you have made all the effort, but still accident being an accident, we never know. It still can happen, but maybe the impact is basically minimum. So that is the framework of the OSH law and regulation that we have in Malaysia. We start with the Act, and then the Act might not be sufficient. It can be supplemented with a regulation. If regulation is not there, for a quick thing, we can release order. Order normally is very quick because it's only a few pages. And then it can be further supplemented by guideline and code of practice. Unfortunately, with regard to these two issues, code of practice and guideline, we do not have, especially code of practice, many code of practice as what we are supposed to. So meaning to say the development of guideline and code practice is a little bit slow. So when it is not, everything is not being covered properly, so that's why if we go back to the objective of the Act, so this objective number 4 still is not being fulfilled. So that's why you can see this law is still in existence because it doesn't have the complete what we call complete support system in the framework that I mentioned in order for the law and regulation to be I would say to be comprehensive. Okay then. All right. So we already encroached into the first hour of our lecture. We shall take a 10-minute breaks. Okay. Come back after 10 minutes. Now let me pause this. Okay, welcome back. All right, scope of the Act, OSH 1994 basically cover almost everything in the context of Malaysian economic activities, except people working on the shipboard and then the armed force. Okay. Well, when we talk about our sector in our economy in Malaysia, We do have manufacturing, construction, mining, storage, transport, hotel, restaurant, finance, wholesale trade, agriculture, utilities, and around 60% are under the category of services. Construction is not much, maybe around, I would say around less than 5%. Normally around 3.3 until 3.5 until 5, not more than 5%. Okay. But among all, mining, construction, and agriculture from the statistic is being considered as risky industry, high risk industry. Okay. Now we want to zoom in into salient provision or some of the important clauses under the law. Okay, clauses under the law. First thing first is National Council. National Council, and then we go through the general duty of employer and employees and designer manufacturers, and then safety and health organization, reporting of accident, prohibition the use of plant substance, and then industry code of practice, enforcement, liability, appeal, and then penalty. These are some of the important clauses. Clauses as many other law clauses because they do have numbering. Okay, you should you can download. You go to the DOSH website, DOSH Malaysia. Just Google DOSH. Then you will be directed to the website, and you can download all kind of act, regulation, code of practice, guideline, etc., etc. Okay, first thing first, National Council for Occupational Safety and Health. When OSHA 1994 was being enacted, they called for the establishment of this council. This council basically the upper body that will in charge of to safeguard safety and health in Malaysia. Whatever matters arise with regard to safety and health, then this body will meet in order to come up with what could be the measure or action. Okay. Membership between 12 to 15 tripartite. Tripartite means to say they could be representative from government, representative from employer, employee, and then some what we call bodies such as safety and health officer bodies, workers association, and a few other association who basically are parties that being affected by safety and health matters. Okay, they are given the power in terms of, let's say, contractor or whoever being brought to court due to certain negligence, non-conformance, and then they are being what we call charged with certain thing, and they are being penalized already. Then they can appeal for something. Okay, appeal for something. So this council will basically meet and decide. Okay, not all the thing with regard to the court matters. Maybe with regard to the usage of substance, plant, etc., etc. If it is being put to stop by the authority such as DOSH. Conduct investigation into legislation. Let's say they figure out that the current legislation is basically outdated, and then the accident statistic is keep increasing, etc., etc., and then they need to meet up and then trigger the action plan. Okay, and chairman of committee of appeal. Okay, this body will basically become the chairman when regard to something with uh, issue with the court matters. Okay, general duty of employer and self-employed person. So we focus on employer. Okay, self-employed person meaning to say you establish a small business. You are sometimes you are the boss, you are the workers, you do have maybe a few staff. That's what we call self-employed person. As far as practicable, you had to provide, maintain, plan, and system of work. Plan mean the machinery. Machinery. In construction, we sometimes we call it plan because machinery can be referred to small thing, but when it comes to big thing, we can call it plan, construction plan. System of work. Okay, system of work is it depends. You can come up with the way of doing things. So it is the responsibility of the employer. Make arrangement. So this word is very important. Arrangement. Later on, we will see this word being used to associate with hierarchy. Okay, even though the hierarchy might not be mentioned, but the word arrangement is being interpreted or being associated with the hierarchy. So that's why people say hierarchy is needed because this um, statement basically call for some kind of way to make sure that people do things in a safe ways. Provide information, instruction, and training. You see, it is the responsibility of the employer to provide training, meaning to say employer have to invest money into training, and this is not happening as what we wish. Then provide and maintain place of work and mean of access and egress. Maybe you still remember in the KLCC precinct project. So the walkway, they put a covered walkway. So this is what the access and egress mean. Maybe it is not in uh, in all construction places, but if you go into a mining, what we call industry, access and egress is very important. Okay, because that is the only way people go in and out when the what we call the excavated area collapse. Sometime, like in the case of Peru, sometimes the miners can still survive for many days because of they do have this bunker that protect themselves. So this is part of the this thing. Provide and maintain working environment that is safe and without health risk with adequate welfare facilities. So this is another issue. Okay, this is another issue right now in Malaysia due to the COVID situation, and then the government basically suddenly figure out that a lot of workplace basically do not have what we call adequate welfare facility, even though we already have law way back in 1976, but the implementation wise, and then the authority basically do not regularly check because the authority also basically only limited in numbers. So that's why people can run away from the law. But then during the COVID situation where every construction or every workers have to be checked, then only they figure out the welfare facility is worse than what we are supposed to. So we do not want that situation to happen, regardless of who you are, where you come from. So you have to be treated well. If you are healthy, then perhaps you can work productively. That is the simple equation. Okay, practicable. Remember this the word practicable. Okay, in the law it used the word practicable. What does practicable mean? Practicable simply means reasonable, as far as reasonable. So in such a way, the law is not that harsh, that basically blanket or everybody to implement the highest standard of law possible. Because you must distinguish between a small enterprise company with a big company. Normally, in a big company, or in the big construction site as being mentioned in the during the talk last 2 weeks. Of course, nothing happened because they have a big budget. But if you go to small and medium enterprise, so you will see all kind of non-compliance because they simply do not have sufficient budget. They do not have the enough manpower to handle all about safety matters. So everything will basically not up to the standard. I can assure you because this is the reality. If you go to a big project, of course, they seem to comply with all the things, but majority of the industry are in the small and medium size. That will be the issue. So, meaning to say, when they come up with what we call risk control, so the risk control should be equivalent to the cost they are being paid. If, for instance, you are being paid in a big amount, then for sure you can come up with all kind of safety measure. Have you seen in the video or presentation? All the rebar basically have all the plastic cap. So the plastic cap is not something new. Uh, 20 or 30 years back, when I studied back in US, they have been using all that kind of cap long time ago. But only now we see those things being implemented. Why? Why not being implemented early? The issue is basically the cost. Who is going to pay the cost? Okay. All right. So basically, the concept of practicable, meaning to say, whatever whatever thing that you implement must be reasonable with the amount of payment that you get. As simple as that. What are the hazards at the workplace? Okay, the hazard at workplace will be defined in the risk management slide, but because it is already here, we just go through very quickly. The hazard is basically the source or situation that can be harmful, okay, to anybody, and it can be embedded into premises such as what? Work premises, okay. If the work premises or the construction site is not being arranged properly, that's why maybe in one of the slides you have seen what we call site layout. When you want to start a project, the construction activity, first thing first, you must come up with the site layout. And normally the site layout will be submit to the client, where you show the position of the tower crane, the position of your site office, the casting yard, where you want to put all kind of store, etc., etc., and the way you basically arrange the material, etc., etc., in a not a proper matter will basically have something to do with the number of accident happening. That is the issue. The plant or the machinery, system or the work method that you choose will have some impact on the safety. The people that you choose to work with, there are some people known as accident-prone personality. Okay, you know what? Certain people, somehow, we do not know, always get involved in the accident compared to somebody else. That's what we call accident-prone personality. One of the reason due to this kind of people, normally they cannot concentrate. Okay, they cannot really concentrate. When they are not concentrated enough, then basically there are a lot of what we call disruption during their work. They will be disrupted by many things. A lot of things will attract their attention, and at the end of the day, they will tend to make mistake. That is the issue of behavior. Substance or material use could be chemical. Even cement itself is basically hazardous, etc., etc. And then what else? Okay, general duty of designer, manufacturer, and supplier. Okay, so this is the third party that I referred to, other than employer and employee, who basically have the same responsibility. They have the same responsibility in order to safeguard the safety and health. They just simply cannot delivered machine substance to the site and then get the payment and then just basically run away. Okay, they basically have to do example, arrange or carrying out testing to make sure the substance being used or the machinery or basically the scaffolding being erected or the tower crane are basically safe. They need to monitor. They need to provide adequate information. For instance, material safety data sheet, MSDS. If you buy any chemical product, basically MSDS will be put on the can to label the material in terms of what could be the hazardous thing and what could be the precaution that you need to take if something happen, what you should do. Okay, and then even as manufacturer, you need to come up with R&D, research and development, in order to conduct the testing monitoring. Let's say you introduce a new substance, and that substance, we have heard there are people who get into problem with that substance, but because since it is just newly introduced, so perhaps the data in Malaysia is not available. So it is up to the manufacturer to conduct R&D at the workplace so that they basically have all the data. At the end of the day, they will conclude that it is safe. It is like the vaccine things, okay? So it is the responsibility of the manufacturer to conduct the testing. And most of the vaccine now is, they have gone through until the third kind of testing, okay? So then only certain authority will basically authorize that vaccine can be safe to be used. Similarly, construction material, plant, machinery, basically do have to go through the same situation. General duty of employee. So basically it applies to everybody. Now I am the employee of UTM. Okay. So I have to take reasonable care of myself in terms of safety and health. So when maybe I go to work at certain high risk places such as the lab, etc., I have to be extra careful to cooperate with employer with regard to all kind of instruction, training given, etc., etc., and then wear and use PPE, maybe at all time or when needed. Okay, so if you do not comply to this thing, then the employer can take action. And if the authority know you are doing this kind of thing, then you will get into trouble with the authority. That is another matter. Okay, example, the workers. Well, accident happened. Okay, so if the authority know, then they will come after you or after the construction site, and then they will investigate, and then they will come up with the causes. You could be charged, either you yourself as a workers because of negligence, or the employer themselves can be charged due to not providing all kind of PPE or safe system of work. And then interfere, charge, and discriminate. Under this clause, not to interfere or misuse. We as employee or even an employer, not to interfere or misuse with anything provided for the interest of safety and health, such as a safety device. You know what? If you, example, okay, if you are operating some kind of cutting machine, you cut wood, for instance, wood cutting machine, the blade could be very dangerous. And in front of the blade, normally there is a cover. It could be a plastic cover. But sometimes when the plastic cover is there, you simply cannot see the place where you want to cut. So sometimes you remove those things. So this is an example of removing or interfering with the safety device. Sometimes the machine could give you all kind of sounds as a precaution. But that kind of sound sometimes is very irritating. So you remove or you modify in order not the machine not to basically produce any sound. But in doing so, there is no protection between you and the machine. That was supposed to be early warning. Okay, so under the law, you can be charged. Employer not to levy charge. What does this thing mean? Employer have to provide all PPE, personal protective equipment, to the employee free of charge. They cannot say that, okay, I give you all the safety boots, safety helmet, safety harness, all kind of safety things, and then I will deduct your salary 50 ringgit per month until maybe 6 months in order to recover back the cost. No, under the law, all PPE should be covered by the employer, because the employer has been, by right, that's what the contract is all about. During tendering, you must basically put all the costing clearly. Then only at the end of the day, you will not completing the project on the losing side, meaning to say your profit is getting less and less because there are a lot of costing that you do not take into account. Okay, employer trade union basically, yeah, replacing PPE, because PPE, as we know, is subject to wear and tear. Okay, subject to wear and tear, like face mask. You cannot use for more than, I don't know, for more than how many hours, okay, by right. So it should be replaced. Okay, but sometimes we understand the workers themselves, they do have some kind of attitude, okay, some kind of attitude in terms of negligence, in terms of they do not take care of the personal belongings. So in such a way, employer can come up with some kind of penalty system. If so, it is like even in Malaysia, your IC, identity card. If you basically lost your identity card for the first time, okay, you have to go to the police station and report. Maybe for the first time it is okay, you can get the replacement for 10 ringgit. But then for the second time, then the fine could be 200 ringgit. But you need to go to the police station and report. If it is legitimate, then perhaps the fine can be waived. You know what? If you just simply lost your IC for the third time, the fine can be 1,000 ringgit. Okay, so there are people who basically do not take care thing. That is the issue that happening. So employer can basically do something in order to manage those things. Okay, and then trade union. Okay, so the third item here is about, if for instance you as an employee, you report to the authority, because perhaps you report due to the fact that your employer do not provide you PPE. That could be one thing. And then you report to the authority because the employer do not provide the welfare facility as what's supposed to be. And then you report to the authority, the employer do not have all kind of safe system of work, etc., etc. And then the authority will come and ambush your construction site and then investigate, and subsequently the employer are being charged. Okay, all right, the employer are being charged because of do not provide all such things. Then later on you try to as an employer, you try to figure out who basically who the hell basically reported to the authority. You try to figure out, maybe you get information, oh, these workers report to the authority, and then you try to penalize the workers by firing that workers, or demoted that workers, or you basically cold storage that workers in order to put some kind of psychological pressure on the workers. That under the law is not allowed. If the authority know about this thing, then again the employer can be charged again. So meaning to say, everybody are free to basically report to the authority, and they should not be penalized by the employer. Simply said. Okay, safety and health organization. There are a few things under safety and health organization. First is medical surveillance, and then safety and health officer, safety and health committee. Okay, first thing is about medical surveillance. Medical surveillance. Medical surveillance is not compulsory to be conducted for all construction site or workplace unless there are cases of illness. Let's say there are people going to the clinic from the same workplace again and again. So the clinic might basically wonder what happening to that thing, and maybe it was reported to the authority, etc., etc., and basically it triggered the medical surveillance. Okay, because there could be many reported cases with regard to malaria, dengue, or what we call toxic from substance, etc., etc., then it will trigger medical surveillance. Medical surveillance is like the COVID situation, but that is the case for viruses, but we are talking about different things, okay? And when it involves process or the work process that maybe you use heavy chemical, where you use gases, which basically you use some kind of radiation, where there could be possibility that people get infected. So when that thing is there, then you need to do medical surveillance. And then when you hire underage, people who are below 16 can be considered as underage. Maybe not at construction site, but if maybe there are people underage could be working in the restaurant, in the tourist agency, where their parent could basically opening up a chalet or small motel, whatever. So in that situation, because of their young age, where a lot of things they are still developing in terms of what we call physiological and psychological things, so they are easily affected. So that's why they need to be monitored. Occupation involves special risks. Okay, if it is risk is very low, then there is no need for medical surveillance. Regulation to prescribe medical surveillance, excluding medical treatment. Person to carry out medical surveillance may be registered with Director General, and normally the person in charge should be what we call medical occupational. We call it occupation. We call it OSH doctor. Doctor. Okay, it is not a normal doctor, but occupational health doctor. Okay, so the normal doctor, but they need to take courses, then they need to take exam after the attended the courses, and if they pass the exam, then they can register with the DOSH to be considered as occupational doctor. Okay, UTM also have around maybe 3 occupational doctor. Maybe in Malaysia we do have around if I'm not mistaken, around 300 plus occupational and health doctor. Okay, they are medical doctor, but because they do take a few courses, and then they are being certified in terms of exams, they sit for an exam. Medical doctor, occupational health doctor, basically the person who are well versed about the impact of work to the health of the person. Okay, so the approach might be different. Later on, when we talk about occupational stress, we might give example with regard to the things being diagnosed by occupational doctor. compared to normal doctor. Safety and Health Officer, SHO. Okay, under OSH 1994, when it was gazetted, so this wording was appeared. Prior to this law, we have not seen the compulsory usage of safety and health officer at the workplace, but now it is a common thing. Okay, so building construction work more than 20 million, it is a must to have safety and health officer. Okay, then there is a order 1997 which basically spell out if the for the high risk industry such as construction is always classified as high risk industry. When you employ 100 workers already, maybe the what we call the cost might not be 20 million, but since you are in the high risk industry, you employ 100 workers, then automatically you should basically have safety and health officer as well. In the oil and gas industry, they have been using, because their industry is very sensitive to safety, and then they are very well rewarded, because oil and gas industry where the big money is there, they have been using a safety officer all the time. Okay, before we in the construction industry use safety and health officer. Okay, all right. Safety and health committee. Okay, under current law, if you employ 40 and above people, workers at your workplace, then basically you need to establish safety and health committee. Okay, safety and health committee. The composition, do we have composition here? Okay, later on. Okay, this is example. Under the OSH law, membership of the committee should comprise a chairman and then secretary. If SHO is there, is already in that premises, then the secretary should be SHO, or people who are well versed about safety more than the others. And then representative from employer and then employees. Okay. All right. Now we go back to this regulation. Okay. Okay. This basically comprise the summary of everything. Okay. For all industry, if you employ more than 5 employee, okay, more than 5 employee here, automatically you need to come up with the safety and health policy. Example of safety and health policy is like this one, Gamuda. Okay, so you can Google UTM safety and health policy. Normally they comprise of few statements. So in Gamuda, for instance, they mention meet the need, expectation, and then legal requirement, comply to legal requirement, prevent incident, continuous improvement, and then integrate OSH as part of the business process, indicate safe regulation, walk the talk to employee, meaning to say the management should basically lead by example, adopt an open, honest communication. There are many types of communication, hazard communication. Later on, we are going to learn that. Foster real teamwork, and then develop people, meaning to say training with regard to OSH. And the most important thing is basically the signing. The top management need to sign. This is what we call the statement that associate with commitment. But if, for instance, you do not have this thing at your workplace, you can be fined for how many? Okay, we are going to look at how much money that you need. You can be fined if you do not have safety and health policy. A simple one piece of paper consists of few statements signed by the top management, but the most important thing is not about the one piece of paper. The most important thing is about the commitment behind those statements. That is the philosophy. And then if you employ more than 40 or equivalent to 40, then you need to have safety and health committee. Okay, that basically cover for high risk industry under Order 1997. You need to come up with a safety and health officer as well in your organization. For low risk industry such as UTM, UTM basically is a low risk industry. Service industry is always like that. Then perhaps UTM also have one or few team of safety and health officer. Okay. All right. Prohibition in the use of plant or substance. Let's say you bring in material or machinery into the construction site, which basically have never been used before. It's a new thing. People do not know what could be the risk associated with the usage of substance. Maybe overseas wise, people have been using those things, and maybe they will report with regard to they could have some kind of harmful effect to the people. Okay, so if you bring those substance and material to the construction site, and then the authority ban you or stop you from using, but you already invest on bringing those things. So you can bring the matter to the council that we mentioned at the beginning of the slide, and then the council will decide. Okay, even though the DOSH basically stop you from doing so, but because you have invested some kind of money, then perhaps you can appeal and present your case to the council, and maybe if you can convince them, so they decide that you can go ahead and use, then it is okay for you. This is the issue that I mentioned with regard to the council power. And then industry code of practice. Industry code of practice normally being developed by DOSH, okay, by DOSH, and then with the combination of industry practitioner. So it is not easy to come up with the industry code of practice. You must basically make sure that if people follow your code of practice, they basically will have the same result anywhere where the practice are taking place. Okay, so as I mentioned, it can be used in the court of law in the proceeding if you can prove that your practice is better than the industry code of practice, then perhaps you can get away from the law. But if you fail to prove, then there could be some kind of consequence in terms of punishment. Enforcement and investigation. Okay. What is the use if we have the law and then the law basically is not being implemented and nobody follow the law? Okay. So the law is supposed to be complied, and it was supposed to take care of the law and order. That is the concept. So DOSH is the department being entrusted. DOSH is the department being entrusted to take care of this. They are the one that take care of the law, so they will go after you. Okay, so when you start working, there are many things that you need to know. uh, law matters. One of the law is basically the OSH law, because it will affect you. You become part of the so-called employee. Okay, Director General of DOSH is basically the big boss. Okay, the big boss, and then they do have officer, investigative officer that will go around. But bear in mind, the nature of government officer, they are not many. Given either they are policemen, the army, or whoever the authority, there are not many of them around. So meaning to say, if people want to run away from the law, yes, they can. given the fact that there are not many officers around, that they cannot manage to go to every premises to check, but you have to be very careful. Please don't get involved with any accident. Once you get involved with accident, and then suddenly they know that thing, and then they will come after you again and again and again until they satisfy that you have done so much improvement. Then they will let you go. Then they will focus on other construction site which are problematic. So even though you can get away from the law, but make sure that you do not get your construction site basically do not have many accident cases. Otherwise, you will be in trouble. So the DOSH authority can give you notices to improve the situation. So this is still okay, not bad. But when it comes to prohibition, the stop work order, then you cannot continue working. You have to stop work, and then it will affect your productivity, and then it will delay your project, etc., etc., etc. And the worst scenario, they will bring your case to the court. Okay, then you have to answer to the judge. Okay, when we talk about the law, regulation, etc., because it is a big thing, then it comes the what we call the penalty. General penalty maximum is 10,000 in general, or 1 year jail. But there are some cases which basically can go more than that due to the nature of the what we call offenses. But as usual, with regard to any law, if you are the first time offender, normally they will not charge you the maximum amount. They will give you a little bit discount, okay? But then the subsequent offenses, maybe you will get the maximum what we call fine. You can be fined, imprisonment, or both. But whatever it is, when these things are being brought to the court, you can defend yourself. You can bring the lawyer to argue, etc., etc. Maybe you can get less fine, maybe less imprisonment or what. So as employee later on when you start work, so please be aware of what could be the law and regulation around. You could be part of the penalties. Okay, failure to comply with the notice. 50,000 normally apply to the employer. Employer is the one that will get the most fine, whereas as employee, you yourself can be fined due to maybe here interfere in misuse thing. As the manufacturer, you can be fined up to 20,000 or 2 years jail. And as employee, you can be fined again up to 10,000. Discrimination. This is for employer. Okay, sorry. Where is the employee? Here, 1,000. Okay, fairly in general duties. So you have to be very careful. Okay, even though based on the current law, that's why new law is coming up in order to increase this penalty up to 500,000 ringgit RM. Because people have been arguing. Remember maybe last year, construction site in Penang, there were landslide that killed a few construction workers. And you know what? They brought this thing to the court. The court only fined, I think, two offender, maybe two contractor or two party, 40,000 each. Why? It is so low. Yeah, the maximum amount is only 50,000. Maybe it is the first offender, so you will get the maximum amount. But still, people argue. Some people already die, but then the offender only get 50,000 ringgit fine. So that's why one of the reason is perhaps to increase basically the penalty with regard to the OSH law. But you must remember, if you want to get uh, the offender to pay more, you have to go to the court, okay, under capital punishment, whatever things, whatever other than the OSH law, you can summon that guy for million of ringgit compensation. Okay, so civil suit, etc., etc., that would be things additional other than the OSH law. OSH law is not much, but then you have to to cover with the other kind of law. Okay, but when accident happen, not only you can be fined or imprisonment, but you basically demoralize people. People are not very happy to work at the workplace where there are many accidents happening. Okay, and then your image, people will not believe in you as an employer because you do not take care of the safety and health of the workers. People do not want to come to work anymore. And then insurance will basically charge you more because you are in the high risk category. You see, instead of paying discounted price, you have to pay more. Again, it add up to the cost. And then insurance claim, if you want to try to claim, if the reason is not strong enough due to your negligence, perhaps insurance will pay you less or can even not paying you. So that's why when you get involved with a road accident, if you say nothing hit you or you do not hit anybody, you just basically fell asleep. You know what? You will not get any compensation. Insurance will not pay you because that is your own fault. That's why if you get into that kind of situation, you normally in order to get compensation, the reason must be different. Let's say you mentioned, oh, I saw something crossing the road and I was panicked and then I tried to press the brake and then suddenly press the gas pedal. That kind of bluffing. Then only maybe you're entitled for the claim. Otherwise, sorry. Okay, this example with regard to penalty, again, the maximum amount is 50,000. Okay, normally employer will be the person who will get all kind of maximum things here. And how about where is that thing? Employee, you can be fined for negligence, and then again mistake 1,000, and then for the what we call supplier manufacturer 20,000. Okay, this is just a brief regulation under OSHA. Okay, we already talked about OSHA itself, but under OSHA there are a lot of regulation. This is just example. I mentioned about NADO port. NADO port is with regard to what we call reporting the accident. Okay, way back in 2004, it was made mandatory that you should report the accident to the authority. Okay, and then guideline. There are many guidelines. Okay, that you can see. So order, not many order, only 2 order. So code of practice is the example with regard to what is this thing? Working in confined space, etc. So what I want you to do, if you want to know more later on, not now, you can go to dosh.government.my. Under dosh.government.my, so you will basically click under legislation. This is the old interface. Right now, they already changed the interface. Under the legislation, you will see the act, regulation, order, code of practice, and guideline. This is example of the what we call the act. Then you click on regulation. This is example of regulation. Regulation under OSHA, Regulation under machinery are different. Okay, these are example of what we call regulation. The word regulation is here. Regulation. Then this is the name of the Act, Occupational Safety and Health, and then this is the specific title for such regulation, and this is the year. Okay, so regulation can be many, can be released at any time necessary, and all these things are free for you to download if you want to know more. Okay, and then order. See, not many order. Only one is about the substance, and then one is about the officer. And then what else? About code of practice. Code of practice are being put under chemical, transportation, occupational health, industrial hygiene, etc., etc. And one of them is basically when working in confined space. Okay, there are a lot of fatality with regard to this issue. So that's why they come up with the code of practice in order to make sure that people can just simply follow and not to make any mistake anymore. And then what else? Guideline. There are many guideline around. Guideline with regard to construction site, with regard to the trenching activity, with regard to tunneling, etc., etc. And one of the guideline with regard to hierarchy. See, hierarchy, which we are going to cover on the third week of the classes later on. Okay, lastly, NIOSH. Okay, NIOSH is not the governing body with regard to safety and health. NIOSH is a government agency that being put under Ministry of Human Resource, similar to DOSH also, but NIOSH basically act for R&D, training, consultancy services. Majority of the services with regard to training. If, for instance, you want to get more knowledge about safety and health officer, so this is the place where you can go to take the certified courses, take exam, etc., etc. Okay. Other than these places, there are what we call companies that being given license by the NIOSH in order to run all kind of courses. So you can go there as well. Okay, you can go into the website and take a look at all the courses available nowadays. During the COVID, they do have a cheap courses or seminar, online seminar that cost you sometimes as low as 50 ringgit, 100 ringgit, or even 150 ringgit. Okay, but if you want to learn more detail, such as safety and health officer, the course is running for 22 days, and it will cost you around 4,000 plus. The courses itself, including the exam. Okay, if you want to become a safety practitioner, there is no other way than going through this kind of certification. Even though the courses might be expensive, you can consider this thing as investment into your future career. Just simply having a bachelor degree or even master degree might not get you very far. You need to basically get a very specific knowledge, such as in safety, such as in planning, scheduling, maybe in risk management, maybe in other field. Then only you can basically become expert on that particular area. Okay, that is the end of presentation with regard to OSH law and regulation. Now let me stop the recording.